the Germans were doing very well in the war. And in the summer of 1916, it appeared that they were going to win the war. It looked like they would win. They had destroyed the British merchant navy with their submarines and were starving the British. And they made a proposal for a peace to stop the war. The Germans did, because they didn't want the war to start with, and now it looked as though they were about to win, and they made a peace offer, which Britain rejected out of hand.
Right.
Yeah. And so the war continues. And the only way Britain could win, and they were working mightily at it, was to bring the United States in on the Allied side. And they were working, attempting that. They had a hate campaign, propaganda campaign against the Germans going on in the United States at the time, with all these atrocity stories about cutting off Belgian boys' hands, gang raping Belgian girls, throwing babies in the air and spearing, all this stuff. All of which turned out to be nonsense and was refuted after the war. But nevertheless, the attempt was to change American public opinion and get America into the war. A couple of months later, I think in November of 1916, this was where the Jews come in. I told you that the sub-theme of the book was the role that the Jews had played in events of the 20th century, and here enters the Jews. A guy named Chaim Weizmann, who's a big guy and leader in international Jewry. He became the first prime minister of the state of Israel, by the way. He and a group of other international Jews went to the leaders of Britain and told them that we are very influential in America. The Jews surround Wilson and are very influential with him. If the Zionists at that time wanted Palestine to be given to Jews so that they would have a home country of their own. That was an objective of the Zionists. Mm-hmm. So these Jews went into the British leaders and said, we will do our best to bring America in, we think we can do it, into this war, if you will promise that Palestine is ours when the war is over. So the British said yes. So these international Jews got busy with the Jews in America, the ones that surrounded Wilson, and they are the ones that were responsible really for making him president. They funded him. They backed him up with, newspaper stories and so forth. And so these Weizmann and his group got to work on the American Jews, and the American Jews got to work on Wilson. And I'll give you the names of some of these guys. They were these Jews in America that surrounded Wilson. They're very powerful men, very wealthy. Jacob Schiff, who was the head of the Kuhn Loeb Bank, the biggest bank in America at the time. Warburg, a big banker. Henry Morgenthau Sr., Louis Brandeis, who was the first Supreme Court Justice, Jewish Supreme Court Justice, that is. Bernard Baruch, a very powerful, wealthy man. Rabbi Stephen Wise, and then there was Felix Frankfurter, were just a handful of the group that surrounded Wilson. Well, they got to work on Wilson. Now, Wilson was already predisposed to go to the aid of the mother country, that is Great Britain. He was at the old East Coast school where we saw ourselves as, so England as our mother country and so forth. So the American people were very against an involvement in any war. So they got busy with the propaganda campaign. The Americans now joined the British effort, and the Jews specifically mounted an anti-German campaign. They brought about pretexts like the sinking of the Lusitania, the Zimmerman telegram, all these things were. And finally, within 6 months after these powerful Jews went to the British, offering to bring the Americans in, within 6 months, America declared war on Germany. And America was in the war, and of course that spelled the end of the war because Germany and the Central Powers could not withstand this combination of forces.